They used to be called derisively those one-arm bandits. That's when there was a handle to pull. But poker machines are now technologically sophisticated push-button affairs that at the last annual count extracted $3.2 billion in pre-tax revenue from New South Wales players. Allegations that an unhealthy relationship now exists between the O'Farrell government and the club's lobby have been raised. Tonight, in the process of putting some of those allegations to the responsible minister, George Souris, it's been revealed that the O'Farrell government will mount a High Court challenge in the event that Andrew Wilkie's mandatory pre-commitment reforms are introduced nationally. First, just how cosy is the O'Farrell government's relationship with the clubs?
When you look at the largest clubs, which some people refer to as casino clubs, they in fact earn more than the majority of ASX-listed companies.
Dr Betty Conn-Walker's PhD thesis, later turned into a book, Casino Clubs New South Wales, for the first time traces the history of clubs, government policy and poker machine gambling from 1956. Clubs play politics hard. Dr Conn-Walker says an October 2010 Memorandum of Understanding, signed by then Coalition leaders Barry O'Farrell and Andrew Stoner, now the Premier and Deputy Premier, with Clubs New South Wales, is the documentary proof that an unhealthy relationship exists.
It confirms that the government has been captured by the club industry at a time when there's absolutely no need for any tax concessions to be given to the club lobby.
The budget also delivers our commitment.
The O'Farrell government has already delivered on the MOU's detailed poker machine tax concessions in its September budget.
At one part of the budget paper 2, which is the one that describes the cost to the state, they tell us that this year it'll cost $47 million to the budget. But going a few pages later, we find that the actual figure is $116 million. And that adds to the current tax concessions, making a total of $770 million to the state. In other words, $770 million in 1 year, in this current year, will be transferred to the club industry.
George Souris, the Minister for Tourism, Major Events, Hospitality and Racing, rejects Dr Conn-Walker's accusation of capture by the sector and her budget paper analysis, saying the latest pokey tax concessions amount to $300 million.
Our reduction in taxation fulfils a promise. It is nowhere near reducing the tax to 2004 levels, but it is an amount about a quarter of the way back in terms of what Carr and Egan had done.
You've cut them a $300 million break.
None of what you say goes to a proprietorial interest. Every penny of that is ploughed back into either services, the clubs themselves, or to the community,
or extending the vastness of their holdings.
But the vastness of their holding reflects only one thing, and that is the service and facilities they provide to the community.
Another indicator of coziness between the government and the clubs is said to be Minister Souris's amendment introduced this week to allow clubs to transfer poker machines between amalgamated venues. Free-range pokies?
What that means is that every time a block of poker machines was transferred from one venue to another, one of those machines was given over to the government. In other words, it was used by the previous government in order to reduce the number of poker machines in the state. That seems to be over.
They're not able to do that. For a club that may be an amalgamated club with a satellite, to move poker machines to a more intensive area, nonetheless a local impact assessment number 2 has to be carried out, and it's in the hands of the Independent Control Authority. They can't just do that, they have to go through the proper processes. Those processes are available, have been available all along, so there's nothing new there, and there's nothing new in the recent legislation dealing with amalgamations and de-amalgamations that freshly creates an ability to do that without going through the original process.
This week, Minister Souris has been confronted with revelations that some clubs have been giving away cash, $100 notes in some cases, through the early hours to keep gamblers playing the machines.
They haven't breached these licence conditions. It's just now that they've come to light, not that any complaints have been received, but they've certainly come to light. I have intervened to ask the department to see whether or not the licences can now be adjusted so that these cash giveaways don't occur in the early hours of the morning and indeed are curtailed beyond 10 p.m.
The Minister insists problem gambling involving poker machines is measurably decreasing through harm minimisation initiatives. So too are the total number of pokies in pubs and clubs, from 104,000 a few years ago to 97,000 today. Of greater concern to state revenue and regulation, the Minister says, is the rapid growth of internet betting, now pulling in $5 billion a year from Australian punters. Through what's known as the Racefields case against internet operators Betfair and Sportsbet, currently on appeal to the High Court, New South Wales is seeking to impose a 1.5% tax on internet turnover involving state facilities. The sovereign rights of the state are said to be at stake. During our interview, it emerged that New South Wales is ready to mount a High Court challenge in the event that Andrew Wilkie's mandatory pre-commitment ultimatum to the Gillard government is enacted through overriding Commonwealth legislation.
Well, the Wilkie-Gillard deal was a political deal to empower the Gillard government. The states are the ones responsible for this area of legislation. It's the states that own the poker machines. It's the states that regulate the gambling and the licensed venues. So for the Commonwealth to expect the states to fall in line with what their opinion might happen to be, even their legislation, they would need to have the states to actually fulfil those requirements. New South Wales, together with every other state, completely declines to do so, and not only on the issue of state sovereignty, but on the lack of compensation. This would involve hundreds of millions of dollars of foregone tax. It would involve hundreds of millions of dollars of compliance, not only within the club movement itself, but also from the government's perspective. And as far as New South Wales is concerned, we would either initiate or join the other states in any High Court action that would challenge the state's sovereignty.
So, back to you, Mr Wilkie.